Hello and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Edwina and I head up the Member Services team at Community Housing Cymru, and I'm here today to talk to you about Alcemi, which is CHC's Futures programme, and in particular Housing Futures, which is the strand we're kicking off this month in collaboration with the National Housing Federation, the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations and innovation experts WhatIf. We've been speaking to chief execs about Alcemi over the last few months, and we've been really heartened by the positive response that we've got from members. So why a Futures programme? Well, when we launched our corporate plan in April, this was one of the key priorities that you said was really important to you. It was an area that we hadn't focused on before at Community Housing Cymru, and something you said would really help equip you to be fit for the future. So, delivering on this priority of equipping you to be fit for the future, we've launched Alcemi. So Alcemi has a number of strands, including business transformation events, a strand called People Potential, which is looking at the skills we need both now and in the future, and also looking at how we grow these skills in-house. A third strand is called Rethink, Refocus, and this is about looking at some big systemic issues that we're facing both here in Wales and in the UK. Looking at backing up these systemic issues with research and then looking at what housing's role is to overcome some of these challenges. We think that by focusing on this strand, we will be able to open some doors across government, such as environment, health, economy, education, and so forth. And finally, the fourth strand is Housing Futures, where we're going to create a space to come together to collaborate on shared challenges and build innovation capacity within the sector. Progress has been made on all these strands, but today I want to focus on Housing Futures specifically. So our vision, a Wales where good housing is a basic right for all, is more important now than ever. Thousands of people are experiencing homelessness. We've got a generation who've been priced out of the housing market, and many more have concerns over quality and safety. The world around us is changing. The challenges we face are unprecedented, from rapid technological change to an ageing population to the climate emergency. And the ability to own our own future will require new ideas and meaningful collaboration. A lot of the challenges that we're facing can't be addressed in isolation or by one organisation. As a sector, we've always been good at turning challenges into opportunities, and Housing Future gives us the opportunity to come together on a UK-wide scale to solve some of housing's biggest challenges together. We think that working in this way, it will be absolutely critical if we're going to deliver on our ambition where good housing is a basic right for all. So the purpose of this webinar is to give you some more information on Housing Futures, and in particular the first phase of the programme, which is the Identify phase. We're really practicing what we preach for Housing Futures, and as I said, we're collaborating with the NatFed and the ScotFed, and the programme has also been supported by innovation experts WhatIf. WhatIf have worked with organisations such as Google, Amazon, BT and the NHS, just to name a few. The purpose of Housing Futures is to build a culture of collaboration and innovation in the sector, invest in our people, build new capabilities and come up with new scalable solutions to shared challenges. This is what Housing Futures is all about. And the NatFed have been running the programme in England for about 18 months now with some impressive results. As part of this webinar, I will share a link to the evaluation report so you can have a look at some of these results for yourself. We're really excited to be kicking the programme off in Wales, and it's a golden opportunity to collaborate within Wales and within the sector ourselves, but also, as I said, with colleagues in England and in Scotland. This ambitious programme will look at identifying challenges, and I'll speak more about that in this webinar. It will also look at gathering insights, coming up with new ideas to turn them into incredible solutions and make them a reality. The new products and approaches that we come up with are of course going to be really important, but for us the most important part of the programme is the innovation process. This is going to make the biggest difference. By learning, by doing, by working together, by collaborating, building a culture to equip ourselves for this new world. This programme will help us as a sector pool our talent and resources, pool our expertise and passion, and bring our people together to solve some of society's biggest challenges. There'll be more information on how you can get involved at the end of this webinar. But first, let's focus on the first phase of Housing Futures, which is the Identify phase. So, if we're going to come together to solve some of these big societal challenges, we need first of all to identify what they are. And as I said earlier, we're delighted to be working with innovation experts WhatIf as part of this programme. They really are the best in the business and an incredibly valuable partner for us as we work to build capability and capacity within the sector in Wales. James Green, who is the Housing Futures lead in England, caught up with Sarah Weller, a director at WhatIf, to look at how we go about identifying the right challenges to focus on.
I'm delighted to be joined by Sarah Weller, a director at WhatIf Innovation. Sarah's going to introduce WhatIf, but we think they are the best in the business. We worked with them on our last program, and they're going to be an incredibly valuable partner for all of us as we work to solve some of these big problems and build these new capabilities. So, Sarah, thanks so much for joining us today, and over to you.
Thank you so much, James. Thank you for the introduction. Could not be happier and more excited to be here having this conversation, kicking this off. When we last ran the Greenhouse program, when it was the Greenhouse program, it was an absolute highlight for myself and for all of us at WhatIf. So could not be more delighted to be here kicking off Housing Futures. And as James said, just wanted to give a bit of an introduction to those of you who don't know WhatIf and what we're all about. So we are, very quickly, we're a global innovation company. We have been around for 27 years helping businesses with innovation, helping businesses think about how to invent. So actually looking at problems to solve and looking at inventing new businesses, new products, new services off the back of that. So thinking about different innovations in their business, but also helping people be more inventive. So working with large organizations on how do they look at their culture? How do they look at their sector in this case? And how do we take all of our learnings in innovation and what we mean by innovation? How do we bring that to housing? So James, as he said, we feel like we're a really great fit to bring our methodologies, our tools, our capabilities, and all of our skills from working specifically innovation over the last 27 years with numerous companies and actually bringing that to you. Now, what we believe is that at the heart of most innovative companies, this is about being future ready. This is about understanding what's coming. It's about having this spirit of experimentation is absolutely at the core. And that's what we believe at WhatIf. And that's what some of this and the rest of the program is going to be about when it comes to the methodologies that we're going to approach in innovation. The whole approach that we follow, I just wanted to touch on before we deep dive into identify, which is the purpose of this. So our approach is this very iterative cycle. So what you can see here is a journey from identify, where we're starting today, which is all about really diving into the problems that we want to solve for. What are those problems? How can we highlight them? How can we talk about them? And are they the right problems for us to be trying to solve in the first place? Then moving into insight. So getting really deep into insight around the people who have those problems, whether that be our tenants, what insight do we need to get around that problem and how can we get it so that we can understand what people are saying, what they're feeling, what the drivers are. From there, we go into ideation. So this is when we start to build out our ideas based on all the insight that we've gathered, based on our understanding of the market, our understanding of the insight from our consumers, from our customers, from our tenants, whoever that might be. And then, as James touched on earlier as well, this is when we go into incubate. So this is about de-risking potential solutions by experimenting and looking at our critical unknown assumptions that we're making about any given idea and experimenting around it. And all at the same time looking at impact. So actually, what are the business implications of this idea? What does an operating model look like? What might the cost be to try and launch something like this, so that we have an eye on the commercials throughout this, because we know how important that's going to be, as opposed to thinking, just blue sky thinking. We need to have an eye on this too. So this is our whole approach to innovation, which we will spend significant amount of time going into each detail as we go through the journey. But for today, right now, we're focusing very much on identifying those core problems that we want to focus in on. Before I go into that in a lot more detail, one of the things that I just want to stop and take a bit of time to talk about is mindsets and the importance of mindsets. And this is going to be, again, something that we reiterate time and time again. But as an innovation consultant myself, as a consultant who works with businesses time and time again on innovation, on looking at these big problems that they really want to go about and solve and tackle, mindset is so important. And actually, when we look at the people that get involved and the people that really stick through ideas and move through experimentation, it's mindset that actually eats strategy for breakfast a lot of the time. That's one of the things that we say. And one of the first things that I just want to call out around mindsets is this idea of two different mindsets around knower and learner. And what I mean by that is that it's quite easy, and a lot of us have a knower mindset without even really realizing it. It's because a lot of the time in our career, we have progressed, we've been promoted, we've been rewarded based on knowing the answers, based on knowing where we should be going, based on knowing the problems to solve for, based on knowing what potential solutions might be. And the reality is that actually the people who will win today, as we've talked about, are the people who have this experimental mindset, who know that this is about learning. And I think there's a couple of things that are really cool here when we think about housing futures. We think about the program that we're about to embark on, this amazing opportunity. What we're doing here is not about the ideas that we come out the back of. What we're going to be doing is de-risking possible solutions and getting to the best possible ideas that we can do with the time that we have. The real opportunity here is about learning. It's about learning how to approach things. It's about learning how to think about problems. It's about learning how to get the best insight and how to use that insight. It's about learning the process of experimentation. These are two different mindsets. And as you can see here, I think this is a really important thing to think about, but also for us to keep coming back to, because it's so easy to A, not be aware that you're in a knower mindset, but B, fall back into it. Well, I know this. I've worked in housing for the last 25 years. I know what the tenants are thinking. I know that this is the biggest problem we need to solve for. Do we know that this is the case, or actually are what we think we know, is that laced with some assumptions that we actually then need to go out and try? And so this is one of the core things that I think is really key to think about with the whole of this program, which is, can we get into a learner mindset? As a sector, can we approach this with a learner mindset, which is about, let's learn about our tenants, let's learn about our businesses, let's learn about these problems that we believe there to be, let's understand there are assumptions here, let's learn that actually we need to be focusing on things like curiosity as a behavior. So really digging deep into why this and why that, and be curious around these problems in a new and fresh way. Step out of our current understanding of housing and our sector and our business right now, and what we think is going on and what we really believe to be true. Let's really try and understand, actually, there might be things that we need to figure out. And the best way to go and do that is to think about this process of experimentation and really challenge our thinking, being super curious, really questioning why. What do we really know? And how do we know it for sure? And are you sure? Are you sure that tenants think that? Are you sure that tenants want that? Have we gone to enough depths to try and make sure? So these are some really key things for us to consider. And that's just a starting point. There's a lot more that we will talk about when it comes to mindsets, but just to touch on, we couldn't go into identify without just mentioning the importance of mindset around this and really thinking about that. The second thing that I really want to focus on as we talk about identify is the importance of falling in love with the problem, not solution. And this is something that James and I have had numerous conversations, and it's something that anyone who was on the program when it was the greenhouse that we ran it last time will, I'm sure, probably thinks about this in their sleep and would reiterate it time and time again. And it's the most important thing. So fall in love with the problem, not the solution. That's the purpose of why we're having this webinar today. It's so easy for businesses when you think about something like this and you think about this kind of program that we're running. It's so exciting to be running across the sector. It's so easy for people to jump on ideas. So easy for people to say, oh, I know what we should do. I've got this idea that we should run for these tenants or for this problem, that like, this is my idea and this is what I think we should do. And then start with that. But actually, if you start with an idea, you very quickly get into quite significant problems, because what is it anchored to? There's a number of different things here. If it's an idea, we'll all have been there, where you roll out and you try and take an idea to market and you try and implement something and you don't get the traction that you expect. And that's often for a number of reasons relating to the fact that, was there a problem there to start with? Does your idea actually help solve a problem for people? Have you iterated an idea based on feedback from your audience? All these different things. If we fall in love with a problem, then actually we can iterate a solution around that problem to de-risk it and get to a better place. You don't fail. You learn and you continue to learn and you continue to reiterate and you de-risk. But actually, this is about pivoting a solution to make sure you're properly solving for a problem. Make sure you're properly getting the insight that you need around that problem. And so that's where we are today, talking about how do we identify the problems that we want to solve for, and how do we make sure that we fall in love with this problem properly. So here we are, first stage, so exciting. We're kicking off with identify. And as I've said, this is all about exploring and questioning your challenge and making sure that we're focused on asking the right kind of questions. So what does that mean and what does that really look like? Way that we talk about identify, and there's some information on the screen about this now, is the way to set out with the kind of problem that you want to solve for. At WhatIf, we talk about this as identifying a human problem. And a human problem is a succinct definition of what we're trying to solve for. It's based on really understanding the who are we solving this for? The when, like when is this problem happening? Like why does this need to happen now? What's the occasion of the problem happening precisely? And the what. And so to give you an example of this, when it came to invisible adaptations, and we were talking about on the greenhouse program, their problem was very much about, for older people in their homes, how do we adapt their homes so they can live in them comfortably for longer? What we do by thinking about that as a human problem statement is we're identifying who this is for. It's for older people. We're identifying when this is a problem, which is when they're aging in their homes, and the problem that that's actually we're solving for is, people they're not feeling comfortable in their homes, not feeling confident in their homes, and actually sometimes worse, not feeling safe. And the whole point around that problem and the way that we identified it was we knew who we were trying to solve for, and we knew what the whole problem was about. So then we could start ideating around that problem specifically. What we're encouraging you to do as a part of this identify phase is really think about the human problem. Really think about who is this impacted by? When are they suffering with it or struggling with it or whatever that might be, as opposed to thinking of a problem more from a business housing association perspective. And so I think this is kind of the challenge. This human problem will provide our North Star to focus on, as I've talked about before. So it's not about starting with our idea, it's about starting with, this is the problem that we want to actually try and work around and solve for and iterate and experiment around. And we can continue to move through this with our ideas. So this is a really important anchor. At the start of any project, I like to think of the problem. This is our anchor that we will keep coming back to, that we're completely in love with trying to solve for. There's a couple of things to think about when it comes to your problem. Is it a problem to be solved for? And is it something that's deep enough for us to focus on? And do we have a right to win on it? And at WhatIf, we have a few different tools to think about here and actually assess these kind of problems. And I thought it was just helpful to give you kind of access to these tools in case it helps you when thinking about your human problems that you want to think about and put forwards. So, is there real value in solving this problem? How often does this problem occur for customers? And actually, is this quite an intense problem? So in the example of invisible adaptations, like this is a problem that was occurring for a lot of people because we have an aging population. So we knew that actually as an incidence, this is quite a lot of people. And we know that this is something that people were considering and thinking about on a daily basis. So from an intensity perspective, it's there. But questioning the value in solving this problem is a really important part of considering and valuing your problem. The second part is around value capture. Is there significant potential to create value by solving this problem? We're talking here about big social problems. So the value and how we identify value could be different. It's not necessarily about commercial value. There are a number of different ways to think about value from the kind of social impact problems that we're talking about. But is there value to capture here by solving this problem is still a really important question to ask. But also, do we have a right to win in the space? I remember from the last time, there are certain problems that our tenants face that we just don't have a right to win to solve. And there are certain things that we do. And that's a really important question to ask and really important thing to focus on, because if we're trying to anchor on a problem which actually as a housing association isn't our problem to solve for, then we'll get into that could be quite tricky. So just considering, is there real value in solving this problem, and can we capture value by solving this problem, and just a couple of other things to think about when identifying the human problem that you think is worth solving for. And the other thing I would say on this as well is, this is a starting point for identifying what you think are the big problems to solve, or what you think are the big social problems that you want as a housing association to be tackling and thinking about. These problems we will continue to understand, dig into more with insight. So actually, as the teams start to gather more insight, as we start to understand the market a bit more, or look at the competitive landscape, or actually start to speak about tenants, this is an iterative process, okay? So this is our anchor that we start with to understand, yes, there's a problem here, but we will understand more about the intensity that people feel, this, the right to win in this space by moving through this process. So what's our criteria here? So one of the things that we've done, and actually, James, do you want to talk a bit about this?
Thank you very much, Sarah. Yeah, so we have done a lot of thinking about what are the sorts of problems that a process like this can solve for. And when you think about our process, what we want to have in every region of the country, in Wales and Scotland as well, we have housing associations collaborating together to identify their problems and then gather insight around them and then find new solutions to them. And so we've thought a lot, what sort of problems are well suited to collaboration on that scale? And the answer to that, in our view, are three things that we want. The first is the scale of impact. Imagine what we can achieve as a sector if we genuinely came together on a sector-wide scale to tackle those really big challenges that we know the people we house are experiencing right across the country, or in many parts of the country. So we're looking for those big systemic social challenges, so problems that affect a significant number of people, but also have a significant impact on those that they affect. And I think it's obviously worth in a futures programme to give consideration to problems that are likely to get significantly more acute in the future if we don't act now. I know lots of housing associations have been talking about climate change. Imagine what we could do on climate change in a process like this. Aging is a brilliant example with invisible creations, these big problems that we're all wrestling with. And that brings us on to the second criteria, collaboration. And absolutely at the heart of this entire process is collaboration. We know from our conversations with housing associations that often we as a sector struggle to collaborate and that we want to do it more. And this is a way, we've got a process, a program, a way of working that we can really do that in a meaningful way. And by collaborating on developing our solutions and building these capabilities, we're also then in a strong position to be able to implement them together. So we're looking for problems that require collaboration and can't be solved by one association alone. And finally, and this goes back to Sarah's point about the right to play, that speaks to the core businesses of our organizations, that we have our collective resources really significant, we have huge expertise, we have roots into communities in every part of the country, we have relationships with our tenants, we have relationships with our communities. So we really want to make use of all of that we have together to have an impact. So critically, the problem areas need to relate to the core business of housing associations. So back over to you, Sarah.
Thanks so much, James. So hopefully that is really clear around the specific criteria for these human problems. There's a couple of other things that I just wanted to talk about. Number one is a tool that we call funnel of focus. And to explain what I mean by this tool, I'm just going to tell a bit of a story, if that's okay. So when the Americans and the Russians were in a race to get to the moon, they were having their competition, and it was a while after the Americans made it that the Americans invited the Russians who had been competing against them to come to NASA and walk around the space station. And they invited them in. They wanted to show them what they'd done. They wanted to show them the spaceships. They wanted to show them the technology. And the Russians came across to the United States and were walking around NASA, and they walked past this glass box. And the Russians were like, what is this? What is in this glass box? And the Americans are like, this is our space pen. And they open up the glass box and they get out their space pen and they hand it over to the Russians. And the Russians are like, wow, how come you have this space pen? And the Americans were like, well, we ran this competition and we set out this challenge, and the challenge we set was to create and come up with a pen that writes in space. We need a pen that writes in space. And so we had this competition, and this guy won the competition, and they got awarded $10 million. And with that $10 million, they went away and they created this space pen, this shiny silver space pen, and it writes in space. And this was the tool that we had. And they're like, wow. The Russians turn around and go, that's super interesting. We were made to write in pencil. And the reason for me telling this story is because how you set a challenge and where you think about a starting point for a problem is very indicative of where you will end up, but also can really set a tone and go too far down a track. If you think about the story I've just told you and think about what you can see in front of you, it's like if you think about this as a funnel. The challenge that was set by the Americans when they went and they had this competition around a pen that writes in space is actually very far down the funnel. They were being very specific about the fact that it had to be a pen and that it had to write in space. And so the ideas and the insight and everything that came off the back of that, because of where this problem was set, was very low down. So everything was, okay, it needs to be a pen. What kind of pens can we use? How can we find this kind of pen? It needs to write in space. Okay, there's a material, it has to write, it has to work with these sorts of materials. So all the things that they were thinking about, all the ideas coming off the back of this were all the way down there already because of how it had been set. You can think about this differently. If they'd raised it, so if they'd gone, we need to write in space, you could immediately have been thinking of a pencil. But actually, do they need to write at all? You could take it up another level and say, we need to record data in space. And suddenly you could have microphones or speakerphones or something else. My point of me saying this is when we're thinking about these systemic problems, let's think really carefully about where we place them in this funnel. If you go climate change, exactly like James was talking about, climate change is too big. Where do you even start? I mean, there's so many different things to think about when it comes to just climate change. That is not a problem that we should be writing as a human problem statement for us to be thinking about as a housing sector. But actually, how do we narrow it enough without going too narrow? So if we just, it's quite easy, it would be quite easy to go too narrow with this. We need to think about changing our paper, or we need to think about too specific, then actually what value we're creating, what benefit can you possibly have because you've gone too narrow. So my challenge and my reason for thinking about this and telling you that story is to say, think when you're writing your problem statement, yes, think about it from a human-centric perspective, as we've said. Who are you solving for? How are they feeling about this, as opposed to thinking too internally? Think about the valuation. Think about the criteria that James has very clearly gone through. But just think about how you would place it on this funnel. And are you placing it on the right kind of place on the funnel? And we have two ways of kind of counteracting this. So keep questioning the how. And if you're going too far down the how, then maybe you need to push it up a level. But also kind of why is this important? If the space people had turned around and said, actually, why are we thinking about a pen that writes in space? Why? They might have been able to push it up a level and not wasted $10 million when they didn't need to.
So that was Sarah talking to James about the process for capturing the problem. And you might already know what the problem is that you think we should focus on in Wales. And what we'd like you to do is tell us what that problem is. The link to do that is on your screen now. We've set some criteria for this as well, because what we want is we want a problem that we can all get together and help solve. We don't want it to be so high that it's too broad, but we also don't want it to be so specific that it's too narrow. So please do take these criteria into account and listen to the advice that Sarah has given when responding to the survey. So in addition to the online survey, we want the opportunity for people to come together and discuss this challenge face to face. So to do that, we're running 4 workshops across Wales in February. Please come armed with what you think the challenge is, and also you will get a number of tips and tools from these sessions to take home with you. So to support the programme in Wales, we are looking to set up a Welsh steering group. We emailed chief execs before Christmas about the group, asking for nominations, and the types of people that we're looking for the steering group are chief execs, chairs, board members, leadership teams, and also a number of tenants. The closing date for nominations is the 7th of February, and the purpose of this steering group is a really, really important one. One of the first tasks that they're going to have to undertake is taking all the information that has been gathered at the workshops and online, and really to filter that and narrow that down into one specific problem which we're going to focus on in Wales. Once the steering group has narrowed down the problem area, it will then be handed over to WhatIf, and we will say to WhatIf, this is what we think the problem is, and they will work then on refining it to make sure we're pitching it at the right level so it's effective for the innovation process that it will then go through. So we are super excited about the Housing Futures programme here at CHC. And imagine what we can learn over the next year by digging down into problems and putting the problem through an innovation process. There's learning to be shared within Wales, but also looking at how solutions to problems have been played out across England and Scotland. So we hope to see you at the workshops, which are taking place, as I said, in February. Housing Futures really is a space for us to come together to collaborate on shared challenges and build innovation capacity within the sector. But for this to succeed, we need you to get involved as much as possible. If you've any questions on the programme, the team who are running the programme here in Wales, myself, Rhian and Hayley, our contact details are on the screen now in front of you. So if you've any questions, just drop any of us a line. And just to say thanks again for listening. Please keep an eye out for more information on the programme, which will be coming out to you very soon.